In this video, we're going to talk about compliance on AWS and how it shows up in your day-to-day work in the cloud. To get there, we'll start with what compliancy actually means in the cloud and then look at a few AWS services that can make this easier in practice. Well, compliance isn't just about passing an audit once a year. It's about showing over time that you're handling data the way specific laws and standards require. In the cloud, that means combining AWS's built-in controls with your own configurations, processes, and documentation. You've already heard about the shared responsibility model, that AWS takes care of the security of the cloud and you take care of the security in the cloud. Compliance works the same idea. AWS works to meet many standards at the platform level, but your applications are not automatically compliant just because they run on AWS. Depending on your industry, your company might need to follow one or more compliance programs. Common examples are HIPAA for healthcare or GDPR for data protection privacy in the EU. These programs define how data should be stored, processed, protected, and who can access it. AWS supports a lot of these frameworks at the infrastructure level. That means AWS data centers, physical security, networking, and many core services are designed and audited against these standards. But things like your IAM policies, your encryption choices, and your monitoring are still under your control and is part of your responsibility. So that raises two important questions. Which rules or standards do we need to follow, and how do we prove to others, like auditors or customers, that we're following them correctly? To help with this, AWS offers a few key services to address these concerns. We're going to have a high-level overview of them and see what do they do and how you might use them. Let's start with AWS Artifact. AWS Artifact is a self-service portal that gives you on-demand access to AWS compliance reports, audits, and legal agreements. With Artifact, you can download AWS compliance report and certifications such as SOC reports, ISO certifications to show how AWS itself meets different standards. It provides you access to AWS legal agreements that your company may need to accept for certain regulated workloads. AWS Artifact does not check your own account for compliance or scan your resources or configure your security for you. It only provides documents and reports about AWS as a platform. Once you have the AWS side covered with Artifact, the next question is how you show that your environment is configured in line with a specific framework as well. That's where the next service comes in, AWS Audit Manager. With Audit Manager, you can start an assessment based on a template that maps to a known framework like PCI DSS or HIPAA-related controls. It would let AWS automatically collect evidence from your accounts and generate reports that show how your current configuration line up with the selected framework. Instead of tracking cloud compliance with spreadsheets and screenshots, AWS Audit Manager connects to AWS services and pulls evidence for you. That cuts down manual work and gives you a more current view of your compliance posture. Now, beyond reports and assessments, a big part of compliance is how people actually access your resources. And that brings us to AWS's Security Token Service, or AWS STS. STS is a service that issues temporary security credentials with limited permissions. From a security and compliance point of view, temporary credentials reduce the risk of long-lived access keys being leaked or reused. You can use STS with IAM roles to control which resources can be accessed, by whom, and for how long. This helps you follow the principle of least privilege and time-bound access that many standards expect. STS by itself is not a compliance tool, but using temporary credentials and roles in the right way supports a stronger, more compliant security posture. Credentials and access are just one side of the story. Another key piece is deciding which AWS services you actually can use under a given compliance program. Just because a service exists on AWS doesn't mean you can use it for every regulated workload. For example, for strict cryptographic requirements, you may not be allowed to use a shared key management service. In that case, you might need to use something like AWS Cloud HSM, which gives you a dedicated hardware for key storage and operations. For some regulations, moving highly sensitive data across the public internet may not be acceptable, and instead, you might need a more controlled transfer method, such as shipping data using a physical device or using a specific encryption method. When you work in a highly regulated environment, you have to check whether the AWS service you plan to use is actually approved for that compliance framework or not. In the AWS documentation, you'll usually see a section called Services in Scope that indicates such information. So now that we look at documents, assessments, access, and service scope, let's quickly recap and summarize how all of this fit together. AWS Artifact is your document hub. Use Artifact when you need official AWS compliance reports and legal agreements. If someone asks, can you prove AWS is compliant with this standard? You go to Artifact, download the relevant report or certification, and share that. AWS Audit Manager is your assessment engine. Use Audit Manager when you want to automate assessments of your own AWS environment against certain controls or frameworks. Think continuous collection of evidence and structured audit reports for your workloads. Temporary access or STS is your safer way of using credentials. You can use STS and IAM roles to issue temporary limited scope credentials, and it would help you reduce long-term credential risk and align with principles like least privileged and time-bound access. Services in the scope is your compatibility check. You can always check which services are in the scope for a specific compliance program you care about. And the main key takeaway is AWS gives you a strong, compliant foundation with its global infrastructure and certified services, but achieving and proving compliance for your own application is still a shared responsibility, and you're responsible for showing that your specific setup follows the required rules. All right, that's a wrap for this video, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, and I'll see you in the next video.